Well, joining me now is foreign editor at The Australian, Greg Sheridan. Greg, it's always wonderful to have a chat with you. The purpose of Parliament today was, of course, the energy bill, but it was somewhat overshadowed by the condolences for the victims of the terrible shooting in Queensland. Have a look at this.
We grieve for Alan Dare, and we grieve for Matthew Arnold and Rachel McCrow, who have paid a price that no one who puts on the uniform should ever have to pay. We can never count the true cost. We can never repay the full debt. All we can offer is the humble thanks of a grateful nation and the heartfelt condolences of the Australian people. With honour they served, may they rest in peace.
Our nation clearly has lost three wonderful Australians. Three people who embodied compassion, commitment, and courage during their lives and in their final moments. Certainly those qualities that we will remember and which we will revere.
There is a sense of protection of our police in the bush because in our hour of need we know that they are there to protect us, isolated from much of the rest of the world. And so they are one of us. And to have this happen in these communities, where the reverence of those that serve us is the most exalted position, above politicians, above mayors, is something that has torn our community and rocked our community to the core.
Greg, we've both seen a lot of Parliament over the years, but this was a truly special moment, wasn't it?
Yes, Cory, I'm so glad you highlighted that tonight. I found it a gripping spectacle. I wish the whole nation could have seen it. Anthony Albanese, Peter Dutton, David Littleproud all spoke very profound truths from the heart. There was no politics in it. Dutton, I thought, was magnificent in his way, and a very nice moment followed a little later where Claire O'Neill, the Home Affairs Minister, got up and said, "Now, Peter Dutton, we disagree on this and that, but let me tell you, everyone on this side of the House honours your service as a policeman. We honour your service in the uniform, protecting the Australian community. The police don't get our thanks anywhere near enough." And this was a transcendent moment, and it's a terrible tragedy, and yet the condolence motion, I think, was Parliament at its best, and there was a level of decency and sincerity and truth in everyone who spoke today, and I'm glad that Parliament can rise to an occasion like that.
Yeah, I am too, because it's not always its most edifying, and we saw a bit of that on that power bill, didn't we? It was a win for the government, but did the coalition manage to take off a bit of political bark off the Albanese team?
I don't know, Cory. I've got no criticism of the coalition on this issue, but the government had to do something. Now, it's quite dangerous in a sense what they've done. Price caps and so on are very crude, clumsy ways to intervene. And of course, the big question is, why don't we get much more gas supply? You know, New South Wales and Victoria virtually made it illegal to explore for gas for years, and then cried that they needed they needed gas from Queensland provided to them. But having said all that, I do think the community feels that, Australian gas ought to benefit Australia to some extent. So I think you need the two halves of this equation. You need to free up a lot more supply, but it is perfectly reasonable for the government to do something like what West Australia has done and say, well, look, in future, you're going to have to keep 20% of your total gas production for Australian consumption, and that's going to be at a price which is, covers your costs and gives you a good profit margin. And meanwhile, you can sell the other 80% at these insane global prices. But why should Australia, people like you and me, Cory, we've often said Australia's big natural advantage is cheap, abundant energy. So why should Australians have to pay the same price as, say, Germany, which doesn't have any gas, when we have all this gas. So I'm not saying I endorse what the government's done, but it was never going to be a free market pure solution here. And I think both sides of politics, need to do things that they're not usually going to do. Labor is going to intervene, and the coalition doesn't like that, but it should free up supply, which it doesn't like because the Greens are dead against gas.
I'd be just happy if we could use it to generate electricity and coal as well, Greg. Hey, on to another matter. The Prime Minister tried to score a bit of a point on China today, saying that he's happy to go and visit in 2023 if, and I have to say it's a big if, an invitation happens to drop through the parliamentary letterbox. Now, is there a danger as being used as some sort of, China washing exercise here, making the administration's behaviour look acceptable in the eyes of the world? We'll engage with them, and whilst we're also posturing about Taiwan, it's really a bit of a complicated message, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the government has done very well here, Cory. So I disagree with Labor on economic and social policy and so on, but I think on national security and foreign affairs, they've done better than any new government I've seen, maybe since the Hawke government. They've not given any concessions to China whatsoever, but they've said at the same time we'd rather have dialogue and we'd rather have a calm relationship. Now, Albanese won't be Robinson Crusoe if he goes and visits China. Antony Blinken, the American Secretary of State, is going there or has just been there. And so we're moving very much in lockstep with the Americans. And I think the message, it has two halves. We're not going to compromise on our national interests or our values. We're still going to call you out for human rights abuses and breaching our national sovereignty and all the rest of it. But at the same time, we want to have dialogue and we want to manage the thing professionally with as low a temperature as possible. Now, if they ever get the balance wrong, I'll be the first to call them out. But so far, I think the Albanese government has got both halves of that message pretty right.
Well, let's wait and see if that invitation does arrive in the new year. Greg Sheridan, always appreciate your insights. Thanks for joining me on Credlin tonight.